Hi o te ata, ngā mihi mahana kia koutou. Warm greetings, everybody. I'll open with karakia. Karakia tātou, tue ki ringa, tue ki raro, tue ki roto, tue ki waho. Tue tātou te tangata, ki te kaupapa o te hui nei, ki te kaupapa o te rangi nei, mauri ora kia tātou katoa. Housekeeping. I'll just start by noting that our meeting time today for this meeting is from 9:30 to 11:30, and then we have a council meeting starting at 12 to go to 1:30. So we're going to stick to that time, and I can manage that, but we all need to manage it as well. So we will be finishing at 11:30. So if we are longish with some things, we'll need to be shortish with others. It could almost be a whakatauki, couldn't it? So welcome to those on Zoom. So we did have Councillor Granny. Is Councillor Granny still on Zoom? Oh yes, and Mayor Tim is on Zoom, and I see Catherine is on Zoom for media. To note, the meeting's being recorded and will be available on Council's YouTube channel. And media may be filming part or all of this meeting. Hearing assistance is available in the public seating area. And we were looking like we might be a bit light on quorum today, so just to be aware of, we need 7 people in attendance, and it includes people on Zoom, which is 2. So if you need to shoot out for something, make sure you do it when someone else is probably not needing to do that. Councillor Greening, you've got a matter to raise.
First of all, I'm not seeing Mayor King online. I'm only seeing 6 people, one of which is called user. So you may want to just clarify you've got your quorum.
Thank you.
My other matter is, given we haven't got any in public forum, at least I'm not aware of any in the agenda, and given we've really only got one decision, which is in committee, and given also the time constraints, I wonder whether we should quickly deal with the sole decision on the agenda today, which is the in-committee decision, and get that one out of the way first. I'm happy to move to go into committee if you require that.
Thank you. We do have a public forum speaker today, which we're going to go to shortly, and we've got staff here who have arranged their mornings to be present for the agenda as we've set it. So I'm going to stay with the timing of the agenda. The run sheet, which is that we'll do our reports and come to the confidential session after those. We've got apologies from Councillors Mackenzie, Kinnemont and Mailing. Is somebody happy to move those?
Also Councillor Schaeffner.
Oh, okay.
Is Mayor King here?
We've got 8.
Mayor King's coming online shortly, so I'll just say the apologies again are for Councillors Mackenzie, Kinnemont, Mailing and Shellcrest, and the Mayor for lateness. If someone's happy to move, Councillor Walker, Councillor Maru, I'll put that. Please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you. Which brings us to public forum. Welcome, Mathias. You know, the drill really is 10 minutes. Give me a little bell at 9. Should you be going then still? And just a reminder that for public forum generally, speakers shouldn't speak about matters subject to legal proceedings. There shouldn't be a repetition of items already brought to the public forum, to the committee. And there should not be criticism of elected members or council staff. And I think and to note that people at the meeting aren't in a position to respond to questions that are asked, so it's not really an appropriate sort of forum for that. Over to you.
Okay, thank you. I will try my best to follow all your rules. I was here in March this year in your meeting, and I gave a speech, and I asked a question that that we see on screen on the top, how was it possible that we had so many enforcement actions against people living in unconsented dwellings with such a low number of search warrants? And I thought this was a straightforward question and clear, and that I get an answer in a reasonable time frame. But this question was a starting point of kind of a journey that I want to explain in this meeting today. So on the 8th of April, Mr. Kim Drummond responded, "From my perspective, we are comfortable with council staff use of their powers for entry under RMA and when a search warrant was required." Okay, but this doesn't answer why. So, and then I learned what we can see at the bottom. It was an email from Jody Corner. "Mr. Drummond has taken into account relevant previous court cases before responding to you. The reply he have already received from him stands." So if you know me a bit and what I do almost every day, namely reading judgments from different courts, then you might guess what I did after receiving this information. Of course, I would like to read these, how it's called, relevant previous court cases. So I asked your organization, could you please give me the list of relevant previous court cases that Mr. Drummond has taken into account? And I requested this information again and again and again and again and again and again. And if I counted correctly, then there were 57 emails, 57 going back and forth and left and right, and all sorts of people involved in your organization, only on this question alone, that I would like to read the relevant previous court cases that Mr. Drummond has taken into account. 57 emails. Quite frankly, that's insane. And what's even more insane, I constantly get the response that my request for information is considered frivolous and vexatious. It's insane because your enforcement officer came to my property, and I simply like to understand why and what power of entry they had. And Mr. Drummond has the answer. He has the information. We can see it here on screen. He has taken into account relevant previous court cases. And based on this, he is satisfied that everything is fine. I like to get an understanding of this, but instead of providing me information, I'm labeled as being frivolous and vexatious. 57 emails. Do you know how much time this is and how much public money was wasted on this? When instead this matter could have been resolved in, I would say, 1 minute with one email. For example, "Good morning, Mr. Schaeffner. Here's the list of court cases. Kind regards. Thank you. Done." But no, instead 57 emails. And we are 7 months later and I still don't have the information. So when I realized it's not really moving forward, I asked the chair of the Motueka Community Board, Terina Graham, if she could help me. Because the role of the community board is to advocate for the interest of the community. And as I understand it, Terina Graham had some form of communication with Mr. Drummond. And then Terina Graham told me that Mr. Drummond told her that I would already have received the information that I requested. It's weird because it's wrong. I did not receive the list of relevant previous court cases. Okay, then I asked Councillor Maru if he could please help me. And again, how I understand it, and please correct me if it's wrong, but I understand that Mr. Drummond told Mr. Maru I would already have received information, which is wrong because I did not receive the list of relevant previous court cases. Okay, let's step back a bit to see the bigger picture of this question. The whole issue is not only about me, it's how was it possible in general against people living in unconsented dwellings. That's a large number. Maybe in the last few years, maybe 10 years, I don't know when this all started. So that's a big topic. And the question, what it comes down to is really, were these actions lawful or not? And I just try to find an answer to this question because I'm interested. And in my opinion, I think it's a relevant question, an important question. And now we are in October, but I still don't have the information, and it's still the same question. But if you can please go to the next page on my yeah. So that's an email that I got from Jody Connor. Yeah, you were not able to locate the email I sent through to you on April 12th and have requested that it be sent. Please find it forwarded again to you. as below. Because it's correct, I didn't get the email, or didn't find the email, April 12th email, for some reason. So I asked to forward it again to me, and Jodie Connor did. What you can see here, Jodie Connor, executive assistants, and then the phone number and the logo of the Tasman District Council. So if we go to the next page, which is then below this, then you can see the forwarded email. And here's the famous line: Mr. Drummond has taken into account relevant previous court cases before responding to you. But what's strange here in this email is that the email signature looks a bit different. There's no logo, no phone number, no address. And what's weird is that it says Jodie Connor, Environmental Insurance, Executive Assistant, Environmental Insurance. That doesn't make much sense to me whenever I get another email from your organization that has a logo, phone number, and a proper signature, but not in this one. And if you look at the top of this email in the first few lines, we can see from and send, the date, and the subject line. What's missing is to whom this email was sent. There's no to address. And if we can please go to the next page. Thank you. I just copied here on top what I usually get when I deal with emails from your organization. I get a from, send, to, sometimes CC, and the subject line. There's a to and a from. But in this email, this famous April 12th email, it's not there. And this raises a few concerns to me. And because I was a bit confused about this, as you might guess, I asked your little Goimer team politely to give me copies of all emails that was sent on April 12th to me personally, and the organization, to all my email addresses. And not just forwarding this, give me a proper copy, the entire document, and I'm happy. And the Goimer response to that was, there was no April 12th email. So what's going on here? And I think it's fair to say at this point that either the Goimer team or Jodie Connor made a false statement. Either the email was sent or it was not sent, but I didn't get it in the first place. Only this thing that you see on screen. So now we are half a year later, Madam Chair, and instead of having one simple question, I thought it was a simple question, there are a lot of questions. And now my question to you, Madam Chair, is, I'm not sure if I can ask this or if it's against the rules or not. So how can I read the relevant previous court cases that Mr. Drummond has taken into account? I mean, that's my only question. What can I do that I finally can read the relevant previous court cases as it was quoted? You can see it on screen that Mr. Drummond has taken into account. I don't know. I'm lost on this, or I don't know what to do anymore. And I would appreciate any help from anyone, whether it's you, Madam Chair, the mayor, elected representative, staff, whoever could help me. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll move to declarations of interest. Are there any? And there are no late items. Minutes to be confirmed for the meeting held on the 29th of August, to be confirmed as a true and correct record of the meeting. Somebody happy to move? Councillor Butler, second. Councillor Ellis. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. We go to our reports, and the first is your Group Manager, Environmental Insurance Report.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take my report as read, but just a few comments around it. So a fair amount of the coverage in the report for this committee meeting relates to some of the activity that's been happening centrally and the wave of reforms that have been either embarked on or being progressed. I start with a reference through to the Taituda conference, which is where the executive arm of council come together. And that followed off the back of a wider meeting with local government New Zealand. And that's where the elected members come together. But what we saw here is a pattern of reinforcement of messages coming through from the government, and I've looked to link the key speeches and the key developments there concerning most primarily the Local Government Act and the changes that are afoot there, and also the Resource Management Act. But really importantly to us, there's also changes in the Biosecurity Act and the Building Act that are also coming our way as well. And so the first part of the report talks about that reform. We then try and dovetail it into how some of the responses that have been provided by this council have been picked up and received nationally. And so there's a little bit of commentary there when we're starting to get feedback from that. Then there's some regulatory changes that are lower level regulatory instruments that are in the wind, and a little bit of a wrap up there of where some of our activities going in that regulatory space, and a sort of a special mention there of the harbour masters function, because that was something that council made an additional investment in for this current year. So we feel it's appropriate to keep you up to speed with developments there of the new equipment that the harbour master office is gaining. And since that time, there have been a couple more quite significant announcements from the government that are not covered in the week. That spans between me compiling this report and meeting here today. Most notably, they would include their fast track projects that have the government announcement on which fast track projects are going to be added to a schedule. The government is now indicating that following the report back from the Select Committee, it will be the government that is clarifying what that schedule will look like, which projects will be on there. And there are a couple of projects that apply to the Tasman region. And the other thing of note is also the inquiry into climate adaptation has now been announced by the Finance and Expenditure Committee in early October. And that sets in train a bunch of recommendations about where our nation is likely to go in the climate adaptation space. So it's particularly relevant to this region and in all of the regulatory responsibilities that we have. So that's just a couple of points to emphasise the content of the report. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Kim. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, just to be more specific, the Sam Creek proposed mine has not made it onto the list. Do we have any idea about what might have influenced that decision? I know that there was, a petition that was, circulated throughout New Zealand, and that there were a lot of signatories to that. There were a lot of letters. There was a lot of activity, and it would be, it's just be interesting to know, what actually did influence the decision, whether or not it was because that's quite a sort of, it got a long way to go, that project. But if it does move forward, then it will be via resource consent to council, which would be a lot of work.
So through the chair, if I pick up that line of questioning, first the government's announcement indicated that while they'd settled on a schedule, there would be a single schedule now, not the two schedules that were originally proposed. They made a point of saying that projects that did not make that schedule were not ruled out of being added to that schedule in the future. So what they've saying is there's a point in time that they believe 149 projects are ready for consideration under the proposed fast track legislation. So that's the first thing, that it may not go through a consenting process. There's always a possibility that it could be added to that schedule at a future date. The second thing in relation to the petition has been, I think, something of order 24,500 signatories to it, has been received by the Select Committee, and that's the Environment Select Committee, and they have approached the council for some framing advice to be received by them by the 21st of October. Of course, by the 21st of October, we've already had the government announcement of what's on the schedule. We would have already had the Select Committee report back, which is due on the 18th. And so our advice will land with the Select Committee after that. So one would assume that they're still working through the materiality of that petition rather than it being a key influence. to the government's decision. So then that leaves us with, why did one miss out and other mining proposals be included? And if you were to run your eye over the status of those particular mining proposals, I would suggest that some of them are more advanced and they've done a lot of the impact assessment work, and it's actually available for material consideration. And there is a group that is recommended to government as to which proposals do or do not get included. We haven't got their report yet, but it's due to be released shortly. And that might give us a little bit more insight as to specifically around the Sam Creek proposal, whether it was particularly fully developed enough to be seriously considered or not. So, we're just speculating at this point, but there are a number of processes that are playing out over weeks to come, which might help inform us, I guess.
Yep. Well, I look forward to getting more information.
I did hear that the panel's report is going to be made available end of this week, and it was suggested that there had been projects that the panel had recommended to the ministers, so more than 149, and some of those the ministers said no to. So that'll be interesting to see that, and there's plenty of speculation, isn't there, around I guess how robust projects are still. Deputy Mayor Bryant and then Councillor Greening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Kim, for the report and all the details there. Mine's the most mundane thing possibly at the end, just around the new parking infringement and towage fees. Just two questions around that. Is there any option to have a soft enforcement? And secondly, the situation with our contractor, how do we continue with this work, or is that in hand?
Through the chair, I've got Shane would be best placed to answer those questions.
Morning, Councillor. If you could repeat the question.
Firstly, just around particularly the one that is disabled park, is there any ability to have a soft option? Right, because it's quite an increase from 150 to 750. Imagine a person in the community currently, if they got a fine like that, it was like, what the? But I guess it's set in legislation. That was the first question.
Okay. With regards to the mobility parks, we do offer an additional hour free parking before we take any enforcement steps. I guess for us, it's important that we turn those parks over, because our disabled community do require those parks. And when they do write in, we do consider any evidence that they provide, i.e. whether their disability or mobility card has fallen down. We do consider that favourably. But it's just to turn it over.
Thank you. And just secondly, the situation with our contractor that's been enforcing previously, we've got that in hand and able to continue the parking policing, for the want of a better word, monitoring.
Yes, Councillor. We've made a focus on our parking enforcement to concentrate on mobility and safety offences in the first instance. We've also serviced in all the areas that we serviced previously. We have a internal staff member and myself and one other doing parking enforcement on a daily basis. Myself, not daily, but as an example, we also over in Golden Bay last weekend. So we continue to deliver the service as best we can.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Greening and then Councillor Walker.
Yeah, just two questions. The first in response to the public forum item. This is an opportunity for you to respond as well. But my question on this point is, can you just confirm that you told the MOT chair and Councillor Maru that you had provided the relevant cases to Mr. Schaeffner? Just a clarification for me. And then secondly, if you have, is it possible you could circulate that email to councillors so that we can see that you have provided the relevant cases to Mr.
Thank you.
Schaeffner?
Could you just repeat the question? Sorry, could you just repeat the question, Councillor, just the first part?
Yes. So the first part is, can you confirm, because Mr. Schaeffner has alleged that you informed the chair and Councillor Maru that you had provided the relevant cases that you'd taken into consideration to Mr. Schaeffner already. And the second part was, can you provide that email containing the relevant cases that you provided to Mr. Mathias to councillors for their benefit?
I'm taking through the chair. That's a question of me.
Yes, I believe so.
Yes.
No, I have not provided any email setting out details of cases. What I have said is that relevant cases have been taken into account in relation to enforcement action, which is not a matter that we can talk about further through public forum. In taking those enforcement actions, the council has considered relevant cases, and indeed in providing affidavits to the court has set out the most relevant of those cases.
So Mr. Mathias Schaeffner asked, I think, of you for a list of those cases you'd taken into account. So did you provide that to him? Did you answer his question? Or?
Through the chair, Councillor, I did answer that question to you in my first comment. I have not provided an email with details of cases.
And the reason for that is?
As I've said, that relates to a matter that's subject to enforcement proceedings, and it's not a matter that I'm going to comment on further today.
Right. Okay, so the Lagoma request wasn't fulfilled, is what you're suggesting?
All questions asked of me have been answered, Councillor, in the way that I deem to be appropriate.
Right. Okay. So, so can I get a blunt answer then? Was the Lagoma request fulfilled? Because there's another issue.
Councillor, I'm not entirely sure what does or doesn't go through to the Lagoma team. The requests that have come my way have been appropriately dealt with, in my view.
Right. Okay, so I'm going to go around in circles. I'm not going to stop anymore. I think I've got the answer that I want. It is a concern that we are getting a volume of emails, and we've seen the Lagoma data. And I think this is just another example of the community getting frustrated because they're not getting what is, I would have thought, quite a simple answer to provide, as Mr. Mathias has already indicated, a list of cases that have been taken into consideration. I don't see any issue in providing that for proceedings or any other matter. I think it's a pretty straightforward question. It's unfortunate that it hasn't been responded to. And again, I raise this because we are manufacturing our volume of Lagoma requests by frustrating what are simple questions. So I'll leave that one there. My second point is just in relation to the consents team, and this relates more to the group financials. We used to get these, and I think maybe this is a conversation that the group manager might want to have with Mr. Drummond, but also I think more broadly with the governance group around the table here today and full council as well. I think it would be useful to return to getting these group financials, because it's alluded to in this report that consultants are being used less, but there's no indication of the financial savings or what the reduction is. And also, more broadly, I think it's useful for this committee to see those financials and see what's happening financially within the group. I think this council chose some time ago not to do that. And I think perhaps given the financial pressures on council, we should return to receiving those so governance has a better eye over the financial spending of the group.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you to you, Chair. I just a couple of things. One is further to what Deputy Mayor Bryant was talking about. So with the enforcement and the changes of our parking and the fees, how is Tasman District Council fronting that with regards to taking our community along on the understanding of the changes?
So through the chair, so we are using existing staff to continue the service that was operated previously under contract. And we're in the final stages of concluding contractual arrangements to bring what was previously contracted inside under our own contractual arrangements directly to the council. So from a public point of view, the level of service is being maintained. And so there's no matter there that needs to be more widely circulated, and we're keeping council informed through various channels of the progress we're making towards bringing those services in-house.
Okay, thank you for that. The second part of that was around, so we're going from, so if you're using a disability park and you shouldn't be in there, the fine from 150 to 750. Are we doing some comms to let our community know the changes that they could expect?
Thank you, through the chair. Councillor, that was communicated by national government, but TDC, we haven't taken the opportunity to communicate that with our community.
So, but it might have been pushed down from central government, but is not Tasman District Council the ones delivering and enforcing on it? So I'm just questioning, are we going to do some comms, because it will reflect back towards us? And then I have one more point after that, if I'm okay.
Sure.
I agree, councillor. I can put some comms together and we can get that out.
Thank you. I'm sure our community would appreciate that. And my last question actually is back to the front table, to the chair and also to Kim Drummond. So some of the conversation that we heard in public forum this morning, I feel a little bit lost, and I'd like some clarification, and you can do this outside of this meeting, but when staff send an email, do we not have the same format on all our email systems? Why is it that the public forum speaker this morning has one email with details on and another one with the to address and other information, which I would have thought would be a formatted same template that we all access? Why is there a change, and how does that happen?
Thank you. Yeah, well, it'll be looked into. Thanks.
And you'll come back to everybody? Thank you.
Sure. Is somebody happy to move the receipt of the report? Thank you, Councillor Bryant, Deputy Mayor Bryant and Councillor Maru. I'll put the resolution. First, I'll just say that I appreciate the update on the various reforms, and particularly the links in there to the range of media releases, work programs and cabinet papers. It's pretty interesting to read the work program that local government ministers got going there. Bit of a mix of, councils should be making their own decisions and also a bit of micromanaging. So I guess we'll find our way through the middle of that somehow. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you. So we move to Environmental Information Manager's report. And we've got a PowerPoint presentation as a part of this. Welcome.
Kia ora rangatira mā, chair, staff. So apologies from Merca, who would also normally be here. She's on leave this week. If it's okay, we'll take the report as read. Alistair's got a presentation, which I know you'll be interested in. And there's just one other item, if I could ask David whether you'd like to raise it, or I can. So this is the first time we've done this. This is around the gravel fees.
That's right, through your chair. There's a brief note at the end of the report talking about an option that we've exercised in the schedule of fees and charges to reduce the gravel extraction fee for the Upper Motueka River. This was done for a number of reasons. It's where we identify a river management need. The volumes to be extracted will of course be worked through with Alistair and in line with our consent. But we've recognized that there is an ongoing need in this stretch of river. And it reflects as well the high level of concern that the community has. It's an indication to us that we're taking it quite seriously and enabling that work to proceed. And it's also acknowledging the fact that we sometimes do have difficulty in getting operators up to the Tupperware area to extract the gravel for the additional distance. So again, trying to recognize that the economics of the extraction to make it more favorable, particularly in this economic situation that we're in here. So the schedule of fees and charges has us basically notify ERC about the change prior to it becoming active. And that's what that notification is. So any questions about that?
This is the first time we've done this?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. We'll see how it works. It'll be good to understand when the report back happens at some time in the future about how effective the approach has been, but thank you. Deputy Mayor Brian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just a question around this, David, which I had marked down anyway. Just in relation to this, I'm just wondering what the science is behind the $3 a cube meter is. How did you come up with that figure initially? And have we got any expectations around how much more volume that will encourage to come out of the river system?
I'll ask Rob to answer the first part, and then I'll answer the second part, I think.
Kia ora, through the chair. Essentially, the difference between the 450 and the 750 is just the number we put in the schedule. So we're not actually arbitrarily choosing that. So we actually put that in the schedule. Those numbers are essentially a slight drop from last year. The difference when that differential was set up, it was based on the 450 being essentially to pay for Alistair's work, and then the additional extra money was based on scarcity and also our ability to use it to direct where we want the extraction, and which would go to the river function. So in all things being equal, David loses money, Alistair can still do his work.
The second part of your question, Councillor, about in terms of what we expect an additional sort of volume to be taken out, I think what we anticipate, still working through the numbers now, is if we had volume to be taken out, there would be no one there to take it. And we have a limited number of players currently who go up to Tupperware to take out the gravel through that stretch. And we'd like to open that up as much as possible. So we're as well talking with Fulton Hogan and the aggregate users group and just trying to get a sense of their hurdles for accessing those resources and trying to be quite proactive about opening that up to a larger market.
If I may, Madam Chair, I just wonder if even a lower price might encourage more, because even at the 750, I think we've encouraged quite a large number of users to take it out, and hopefully this will encourage even more. And we need to be able to keep doing that on a regular basis in places as required.
Through the chair, that would require a change to the schedule of fees and charges. And I'd caution council against that, because this income actually pays for the work we need to do to justify that the gravel is available to be taken. So it comes down to either people pay for it through their rates, or the people who benefit from taking the gravel pay the fee. And it's the process to make the extractor pay for the work that gets done to justify the need, rather than the general ratepayer. The general ratepayer is still subsidising the cost of the work, though.
Yeah, I certainly agree that the extractor should pay something. And I'm comfortable with the 450.
We'll find out, won't we?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
I'll still say it's too high.
Yeah. Your point is noted. If there's not anything further around the gravel particularly, we'll go to the presentation. Is that where we're at?
Kia ora koutou. In previous EI managers reports, we've just highlighted the work that was being undertaken, producing a new flood model for Tākega, and councillors had expressed wide interest in this work. And now that we have arrived at the end of that process, I thought it was just appropriate to take 5 minutes or so to cover off some of the details of that work, and just go into a little bit more detail perhaps than what is covered in the report. So if we could just have the next slide, please. I'd like to acknowledge that there's a number of staff who have worked on this project. So I get to sort of sit here and tell you about it, but there's a lot of work that went on behind the scenes. Brian Scholes and Glenn Stevens and my team, Martin Doyle, our principal hydrologist, all worked very diligently on this project to achieve a really good outcome, and they did so in conjunction with our partner, E2 Environmental, who was our consultant on this project, and they actually undertook the actual modelling itself. If I could have the next slide, please. So this council, the first flood model that we ever did was Tākaka, and that was undertaken in 2010. And so we have updated and produced an entirely new model for the Tākaka Valley. And the reason that we've done that is that we've had new data. Oh, thank you, Rob. We've had new data and modelling technologies, the actual sort of computer programs that we can use to undertake these models. They have advanced significantly since 2010. The figure in the centre of the slide there, that's the extent of the 2010 model. The 2024 model that we have, it basically covers the entire valley. The area in the figure on the right there that you can see, that's the area that's been modelled in what we'd call 2D or 2.5D. But we've also modelled all of the wider catchment there, but just in 1D. And so we have for the first time a model of the whole of the Tākaka Valley and the Tākaka catchment. Our new model uses what's called rain on grid. And I'll just sort of highlight that, but essentially that is the model. It's simulating rainfall. And the advantage of that over the previous model was that there might be areas of the catchment that are subject to, say, ponding during rainfall. And under our previous model, we wouldn't have necessarily captured that. Our new model's got a much higher resolution. And so through the town and along the river, those are the areas that we have the highest resolution. And then if there are areas, say, on the margins of the valley, that sort of thing, we can model those in lower resolution because we don't need quite as much detail in those areas. Our advances in model technology enable us, as I said, to model the whole catchment. And we've also got a range of climate change scenarios in the model as well. One of the key questions for us, we're going to use the model for decision making, is that we need to understand how real the model is. And so we undertook a range of calibration and validation with the model. And this was a somewhat complex process, and it ended up taking us a bit longer than we initially had sort of budgeted for, because, and that's a time budget thing, not a money budget thing, because of the complex geology in the catchment. So we've got this karst geology, and that just means that when you're modelling the flows of water through the catchment, it becomes particularly complex, and the modellers had to get a little bit cunning about how they represented the all of the caverns and stuff, and the infiltration of water into the groundwater, and then back into parts of the river. They had to get a bit cunning about how they represented that in the model, but they achieved quite a good representation. What I've got on the top of the slide there is just a number of historic flood events that we represented in the model. And we've got the actual measured flow at the Kotinga flow gauging site there against the representation of that flood event in the model. And you can see that there's some variances there. But generally speaking, we've represented those historic flood events quite accurately. And then the two graphs there are just a couple of graphs that I've taken out of the report there. One's for the June 2004 flood event, and the other one is the March 2016 flood event. And you can just see different basically peaks in the flood recorders there as they were actually measured during those flood events. And then I think the black line on both graphs is what was actually represented in the model for those. And so the reason that we go through all of this process is to make sure that we can be sure that the results that we're getting out of the model are rigorous and robust. The other thing that we have and it's particularly for the 2016 flood event, is that we've got a number of photos that were taken down the valley from a helicopter after that flood event. You can see some of those photos in the upper part of the slide there. And we compared those photos with the flood model for that particular time during the flood. So the figures on the bottom part of the slide there, they're not necessarily the peak of the 2016 flood, but they're the time in the flood model that represents when those photos were taken. And I've also included those figures in the report if you want to look at them in more detail. But what I would say generally is that what we get from the flood model for the 2016 flood event closely matches the photos. And so that again enables us to have some confidence that what the model is representing is realistic of reality. And that's, as I said, important for decision making. Sorry, this is a very boring slide, but just to give you a really quick overview. So we've modeled some historic flood events to validate the model so that we can be sure that we've got a robust model. And then we've modeled a range of what we might call design floods of different sizes. And so we've got a 10-year flood, a 20-year flood, a 50-year flood. That's important for understanding what water levels might be, because it's the 50-year flood or a 2% AEP is the other way that we refer to that. That's important for refusal under the building code. We've got a 100-year flood or a 1% AEP, and that's where we might issue a hazard notice under the Building Act. So if your land was subject to a 100-year flood, we might issue a hazard notice. And we've also got a 200-year flood in there because it's useful for us to understand, that's not getting up to approaching a Cyclone Gabriel, but it's useful for us to understand what a really big flood can look like. And as I said, we've also modelled a range of future climate change effects as well. So just an example, and I've kept this at a reasonably high detail, but on the left, we've got the upper part of the valley. On the right, we've got the lower part of the valley. And this is for a 1% AEP flood event, or what we might call a 1 in 100-year flood event. And the extent here, I've got a photo on the next slide of the July 1983 flood. This is very close to what happened in 1983. The 1983 from the flow gauging, that was about an 80-year flood event. If you overlay this model in the GIS with the historic mapped extent of the 1983 flood event, they're quite coincident. Without sort of going into great detail about the depths, if anybody's got any particular questions about any particular areas or anything like that, I can address that sort of after this meeting. You might appreciate I don't know the depths everywhere across there, but for example, across Bridges Hollow, I did write that down because that's kind of interesting. How do you get in and out of town during this event? During this event, across Bridges Hollow, between about 0.6 and 1.4 metres of water, and across Waitapu Splash, about 1.5 metres of water. So you'll appreciate then that there's a significant amount of water moving around in the valley at this time. I think a reasonable question would be, well, what are we doing with this information? So this new modelling, it gives us the ability to provide robust advice to the community. And I've already sort of mentioned some context, the building code refusal, hazard notices. So we're able to provide people with advice about ground and floor levels for their developments in the town, basically to keep our communities safe. We're also working with the hydrology team and the flood warning team around how we can use this information for that flood warning and emergency management purposes. And that's something that we've started working on as well. We are working also on how to make this information more accessible, and I did mention that to councillors earlier this week. The key thing, though, is that compared to our previous understanding, we would expect during a major flood for there to be more water in the Takaka Valley than we might have previously understood. And that just reflects our better understanding of flood hazard in the Takaka Valley.
Sorry to interrupt. So when you say more water,
So what I mean by that is in the previous model that we had for, say, a 1% AEP
Okay.
event, the current model shows more water in that same event, and that just reflects our updated modelling. So we've
Yeah.
got a better understanding. So potentially in the past we didn't have quite as good an understanding as to how much water there might actually be during that sort of
Yeah.
event.
and when you say through Takaka, are you meaning down through the valley generally?
Down through the valley
Okay.
generally.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, some folk might read that and think we think of Takaka as the township.
Yeah,
over
sure.
there. So I've just been thinking about you know, do we apply the modelling to inform stock banks and what I guess would work out. So in the case of Takaka, what's it going to take for the town to flood again? And then what, and I guess that's what we weigh up here is how much resource goes into protecting and how much you suck it up and think, well, actually, it's likely to happen this often, and that's how life is if you live by a river. But God, that's a terrible thing to see in the media tomorrow, isn't it? So I hope that doesn't happen. But the idea around what we apply this to. So just thinking about Takaka, particularly given the change, some of the things that have been implemented. We haven't had a flood like 83 since 83, and there are people have got some ideas about how come that is, about what's in place, and I suppose I have an interest in to what extent we'd apply this to river management and banks and things.
Yes, and we did run some scenarios in there around river management, and river management, it does make some difference to flood levels, but it does not make a pronounced flood difference to flood levels. So maybe 20 centimetres of difference in a water level. Yeah, so there are, we have been answering some of these questions. Yeah. Just in terms of that, thinking about 1983 and the lower bullet point there about, so we are thinking about the situation that we have in Takaka today and what would happen if we were faced with a flood event there tomorrow, and how can we provide robust advice through to CDEM that can then flow through to the community so that people can be safe given the situation that we have today, because that is the context that we need to be mindful of.
Thank you.
But yeah, otherwise, any questions about this or any other questions that might have been raised by the EI Manager's report?
Councillor Butler's got a question.
Yeah, thanks very much, Steph. It's just further on in the report, it talks about setting a trigger level for evacuation. I don't know what the processing of that is. So that's my first question. And the second question is this able to be presented to the community board? Not by Zoom, but in person? That would be really appreciated.
Yeah. So I think that'll be in the flood warning section of the manager's report. So staff met last week, and so that was staff across the natural hazards team, the hydrology and the flood warning teams, and the river and coastal structures team to discuss how we can use the information in this modelling for flood warning, and to have robust plans in place for providing advice to the community during a flood event. And so, essentially it was, well, around what levels can we be advising people around evacuation, where in the town can it be safe for people to move to for a period of time. And so that is work that staff have begun, so that we have those plans in place for when that sort of event occurs. But it's not as simple as sort of saying there is a trigger or when we might say evacuate Tākaka, but we're working on the detail of that.
Well, that sounds great. I mean, it would be really great to have a kind of coordinated, well publicised process about that, so that we don't have fragmentation and some people have different ideas about what they should do. So yeah, I'd like to see coordinated.
Absolutely. I mean, and yeah, but as we're sort of seeing in the United States at the moment, there's always going to be people out there that have different ideas about what they should do. Just on your second point, yeah, very happy to come and speak to the community board. I think Brian Scholes, my colleague, did very briefly talk to the community board earlier this year when there was some discussion around the FDS in Tākaka, but we're very happy to come again and talk to the community board about the results. Absolutely.
Unfortunately, that meeting, that was the sort of day that everything went wrong, and we ended up, I have got some of the hard copy maps that he gave out, but everything went wrong, so we actually sort of need to repeat it.
That's all right. I didn't appreciate that. No worries. Yeah, we'll set something up.
Rob?
Kia ora, if it's okay through the chair, just before you wrap it up, thank you, Alistair. I'd also like to mention the Biosecurity Act review, which was mentioned in Kim's paper. So staff will come back to council if we ask to put in a submission, and that will be a discussion first with Kim's team and John's team, so the strategy and consenting processes. We're actually keen to see what happens there, because it does look at pathway management, and from an area like Te Taihu, we receive from outside the district, and we have to manage that. Particularly our marine space comes from north of Auckland, and so those yachts are bringing our problems. And of course, we have a lot to lose with our aquaculture industry. So we are very keen to see what the proposals are there. Also, there's changes around enforcement and processes, a shift to the minister for a lot of the direction there, which will be probably supported by us. And the last one there is around that Taiwan cherry. So you may or may not have seen Lindsay on TV. He off his own bat actually contacted them and asked them if they're interested in the good local story. So we're really pleased about that, and it's actually had a really good response. So a lot of people have been ringing up and saying, oh, we've got these trees and we want to take them out. Unfortunately, we've also found a few more that we didn't know about. Luckily, they're close. And that is still carrying on. So you might hear things in the media where push comes to the shove, and because we do have an active program to remove those trees. So some people are not necessarily happy with that. Most people are very happy, and particularly after that article, even people who were resistant have watched the article and said, actually, I agree with you now. So it's been a really good process.
Thank you, Rob. I'm looking for somebody to move the receipt of the report, please.
I'm happy to move, but can I just make a couple of comments, Madam Chair?
Yes.
So yeah, just in relation to the point that Rob's just covered off, I did actually see that article on 7 Sharp, and it was really good, and it came over really well. So well done to Lindsay and his team. And the other thing that I've noted in the report is just the Black Valley Stream, and understand we won an award for that work, and that's also received very complimentary from those people across the district, that work that's been undertaken up at the lake. So well done to the team. So with that, I'm happy to move the report.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Happy second.
Councillor Maru's happy to second. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you very much. Going to move to the Building Assurance Manager's report. Welcome, Matt.
Morning all, and through you, Madam Chair, I'll take my report as read. I'll give you just a quick summary of what's in there. For starters, I think you're aware of anyway that we've achieved a continued accreditation since my last report. We cleared all our GNCs back in May. We've also since had a territorial authority assessment, and that was in relation to dangerous and affected
or unsanitary building notices and certificates for public use. There's a few issues found there, and we have since submitted some information back to MB, so we're just waiting on a response from them. Consent numbers are down significantly, which sort of been keeping you guys informed with anyway. But yeah, we're sort of on track to, well, it was on track to the to what we'd forecast. So we're 18% down on numbers on building consent applications overall, and there's a 53% drop in new dwellings, which is pretty much all our cookie cutters. Commercial still pretty steady. Architecturally designed homes are pretty steady. So it sort of appears that anyone that needs a mortgage is the other ones that, you know, the other sort of buildings that aren't getting built. But I guess with the latest news, the OCR, that's that, you know, could change things in the near future, hopefully. Over the last couple of years, we've had a bit of trouble balancing our budget. So we've made a few changes, and obviously that was, a lot of it was down to the drop in revenue coming in. So we went through a restructure earlier on, back in July it started. But the result of that, we ended up having to lose 2 staff and disestablish 3.5 vacant roles. So that was a bit of a tough time for everyone involved. So sort of, it's been a tough time. We've had the compliance team there just continuing with investigations on unauthorised building work, processing discretionary exemptions, pool audits, doing pool audits, BWAF audits. That's just ongoing work. Just continues. We are currently recruiting. We're the team leader for the compliance team. He's recently resigned, and we've got a building consent officer, so that was due to resignation too, so we're recruiting for those. There's obviously been a lot of changes. Government's, you know, feels like they're announcing stuff every week. So it's been a bit hard to keep on top of, but since my report, the latest one was BCA reform. So in the next few months, they're going to be holding a lot of a series of meetings and workshops, and the minister aims to get a public consultation document out in the first half of next year. So there's going to be, they're pushing this one through trying to push this one through pretty quick. So that's going to take up quite a bit of time, I think, just with meetings and stuff. So I think it's probably moved towards the right direction anyway. So I think that sort of covers that. If there's any questions.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate it. Would have been a very difficult time, you know, doing the disestablishment of roles. So stressful to say the least, I think. Deputy Mayor Brian.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the report, Matt. Obviously, lots of changes happening, and I guess in some ways the reduction is not entirely unexpected with the way the economy is tracking. Just a question around at 15.6 in relation to the survey results. I'm not even sure what page this is on. Page 50.
Yeah.
So second one down, firstly, I expect it should say in the text it says you expected day. That should be expected to pay, I imagine. And just wondering, I have heard anecdotally, and I'm not sure, and I couldn't see it anywhere in the report, but I've heard that now that you're charging for emails in relation to building consents. Just want to verify if that's correct and has perhaps led to this reduction in satisfaction.
Actually, with the emails, it's basically, it's not just an email, just a basic email. If you're going through a building consent process, any time that's spent in the system, whether it's, you know, it's all recorded through the time tracker. So, you know,
Like a portal or something.
yeah. Yes, it basically goes down to user pays. So if we're going through a process, back and forth emails, trying to get the information that we need or help them out, it's just tracked through time on the consent. So it's a bit like a request for further information, but it's just all that time that is spent on the actual consent.
So do you think that's contributed to this price reduction and satisfaction?
I don't think entirely. No, I don't think entirely. There could be a number of reasons. I think the comments out of this one, there was only, I think it's something. Yeah, the only comments were, what were they? Oh, something to do with, you know, they should be cheaper or something. They're pretty basic comments.
Right.
Yeah, they just think it's too expensive.
So just to tell us a little more about this thing around the portal and charging for emails or information. Is that not factored into your building consent that there'll be some discussion?
Depending on the cost of the build, we do have fixed fee consents. So any of those sort of ones that, you know, they've worked out on an average. Can't remember off the top of my head what the price is, but those ones are a set fee. But when you get into the more, you know, into the commercial and the more technical building consents, where there's more communication and work involved, they're done on a time track basis.
Are people let know that at the time they get their consent? So
with the time tracked ones, I'm sure they're aware that it's all time tracked because it's set on our fees that what the fee is and, you know, how much is being charged per hour of time that was spent on the job.
This isn't a new thing.
No.
So nothing's changed.
Well, other than the thing around it, some people believe in they're being charged by the email. I had a call earlier.
Well, technically they are, because if they're within the job, because we send out emails of, you know, if they spend 5 minutes on the job, the time's ticking away, and it'll just get all charged. It's not individually charged; it's the actual time that you spent working on the consent.
Just adds into how long or whatever the interactions are. Just all builds up. So
it takes 5 hours to process a consent. Some of that will be involved. You know, there'll be emails involved. There might be phone calls involved. It's just being accountable for the time that we spend on a job.
Thank you.
Councillor Walker and then Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I remember at the last meeting we brought up around these swimming pool fencing and non-compliance, and I asked for a report back on how many we've got in the process at the minute that aren't complying for whatever reason. And I was expecting to get some feedback on that, because mindful that I know of a few, and the last thing we want is them to go anything further than from here, as in court. So are we going to get that information? Thanks.
Yes, sorry, I didn't supply that, so I'll get onto that today and get it to you. Sorry for that.
Just an email out to all of us would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, we've got a spreadsheet. Sorry.
Anything further? Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Yeah, I'm just wondering about the linking up between the applications for resource consents going through, and how that whether or not, you know, you're able to plan for you know, and what the volumes of building consents might be into the future, because you know, is there an increase in resource consents that's going to actually end up with you know, people being in a position to then apply for a building consent?
Yeah.
Or is this downturn a longer term thing?
Well, we believe the downturn is a long-term thing, but after yesterday's news, I guess it sounds like it might pick up in the next 12 months. But as far as working together with resource consents, we can give them our forecast to consents coming through. 'Cause at the moment, we're three months into this financial year, and so far we're pretty much bang on with our forecast. But then again, with the news yesterday, I guess we didn't really know that was coming, and we may have to readjust. But I guess that's where we talk to the stakeholders and see where they're at. When they dropped that OCR 25 points back in August, they all come rushing to us saying, "Oh, we're going to be throwing a whole heap of consents in the door shortly," and it hasn't happened. It starts a little bit of interest. People will start talking about wanting to build, and it just stops.
Kim's got a comment too.
Keep in touch.
Just through the chair, if I just remind councillors that we did have a rather artificial spike in subdivision applications, which was driven by the increase in development contributions. And what that still gives those, once they're processed, is still 8 years, I think, before they actually have to commit to builds. So there's a little bit of an artificial signal in the system, which hasn't, as Matt's saying, has yet to translate through to building activity. And it's a bit of an unknown as to when the economic sort of situation will settle so that people have confidence to build again.
Thank you. Councillor Dakey.
Thank you, through the chair. Matt, the survey results, are they, I mean, they're obviously a method we use. How do they compare to other councils? Are we standalone in these trends? I mean, the charges we set are very much, we set our own charges. We're trying to get cost recovery, not put on ratepayer. So that's on us as a council rather than you guys. But I just see the time taken to get your license. There's a downward trend there, and satisfaction with how long it took. And I see that as, I think, well, there's less work coming in, less workload. Obviously, you've had to let some staff go there, which is unfortunate. But I just wonder how that trend is relating. Is that these trends occurring across other councils, or is there something here I'm sort of not getting?
Through you, Madam Chair, I'm unsure if it's what it's like with the other councils, but I can look into that. But when I look at some of the comments, I do wonder if they know the difference between a resource consent and a building consent. So there's possibly that going on, but there's something more to look into. But we're still getting our consents out within 7 working days, so that's where the confusion is. And I think with the survey that's done annually, some of these people that they're surveying may not be fresh in their mind of what the actual situation is. I'm unsure. So
okay, thank you. So it may just be general discontent, and then it's echoed through and sort of an inaccurate feedback.
Yeah, could be. Yeah.
But it would be interesting to know how some of the other
I'll
your colleagues at other councils see how it's tracking for them as well. Thank you.
Cool. I'll check that.
Kim.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on that question, when I brought the entire consents survey to the committee, I did point out that it's a model that has been in play for 4 years. And so we were waiting till we actually get a bit of a trend to look at the various signals that you're talking about, Councillor. And one of the concerns that we have is this scratching the surface at the end of the year of someone's memory of a series of interactions that they may have had with the council in different ways, shapes and forms. The recollection might not necessarily be what it needs to be about the particular process they've been asked a question about. And we use it because there's a level of service in the long-term plan for both resource consents and building consents to get some degree of customer satisfaction. That's what it was designed around. But we also use it to assess satisfaction against some of our other services, such as dog registration and more environmental health. And they give a different pattern. If we are currently, as indicated the committee, rethinking whether that's the most effective way to truly get a measure of satisfaction for the 2 consenting processes, because it does seem asking people at the end of the year about something that may in their distant memory, it might not be the most productive way to get a true sense of satisfaction. So we are looking at designing tools which are pretty much immediate upon receiving a consent and getting an assessment of the person's experience at that point in time.
Thank you. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you. Comes just answered my question. Thank you.
Oh, there we go. Is someone happy to move receipt of the report? Councillor Butler, and a seconder, please. Councillor Ellis. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Thank you very much, Matt.
Thank you.
Groundwater SOE report, Melanie. Welcome.
Marina. I'll try and keep this short to respect your time, but I'm going to take the report as read.
Yes.
Cool. So this little beast. Essentially, it is a good news story, so we've got something to celebrate. But it is a cautionary tale in that sense. So groundwater quality is tracking to be very good across our region, across all of our aquifers, which is fantastic. However, I do want to reiterate we have some vulnerabilities attached to our shallow, unconfined aquifers, and these are across all of our river floodplains and also on the sandy coastal shores as well. So we've got a large number of people in our region who rely on this groundwater for their drinking water purposes. These are private bores that they own. And because of the nature of its shallow aquifer and the way that contamination travels through, there is a potential for contamination to be present in their bores. And that's something that I want you to all talk to your communities about if you have the opportunity, just to remind them that there is a potential for contamination to exist there. So it can come in various different forms. One of the most obvious ones that pops to mind is what happened a couple of weeks ago in Motueka. There was a sewage spill that went directly into our aquifer. We're monitoring it really closely, but a lot of the people there don't have a treatment system in place at their properties to ensure that the water that they're taking from the ground is safe for them to drink. So it's a conversation that we need to have with them to make sure they have adequate treatment in place to ensure that their water is safe to drink. A lot of these bores are permitted activity bores. We don't know where they are, and they're of varying in varying conditions. Some of them haven't been looked after very well. And it's a conversation that I have when I'm on these people's properties to talk about how to adequately protect their bore to make sure nothing's falling into it and can cause contamination to happen at it. That's essentially what I wanted to get across, was that there's a potential for these shallow aquifers to have contamination happening at them. So to make sure that they have adequate treatment in place, or if they are aware of something that's happening, to make sure that they have the knowledge to either find an alternative water supply if they've noticed a weird colour or a weird smell coming out of their bore that they haven't seen before, and also to make sure that they're looking after the bore head itself so they're not unintentionally causing contamination directly to the bore. I'd like to welcome any questions if you've got any.
Thank you. Councillor Dakey and then Councillor Walker.
Thank you for the report. For the chair, I've got chemical residue detections 5.3. There's a clause in the report that mentions emerging organic contaminants, and just clarification around the time frame there. What's happening? Seems a long time, and just that's one point. And the other point was in this process of looking for these chemicals, do we measure atrazine at all, which is a chemical that's quite on the radar now as being potentially disruptive for human health? So question here just around what's the time frame there with that, and are we looking at atrazine in groundwater at all?
Cool. So through the chair, with your mention towards emerging organic contaminants, we're also quite disappointed with the time frame that's coming through. The laboratory that's looking after it is processing all of New Zealand's EOCs, and it's we were given assurances earlier this year that we'd get results, and it keeps getting pushed back. So we're following up quite regularly as to when we're getting them back. And the moment that I do have them, I will let you know, and also the properties that we sampled know of their results. So we're waiting with bated breath, the same as you are. As to the atrazine, yes, that was included as part of the big scope that was sampled for. And as far as I'm aware, we haven't had any detections. So good news story for you.
Where do we find atrazine? So is Atrazine, is
Yeah.
that used in chemical sprays or something?
Yeah,
Or
so it's I'm not sure of its exact classification, but I feel like it's under the umbrella of the pesticide kind of thing. It's looking after that kind of control. We have had simazine in the past detected, which is kind of a brother sister to atrazine. Again, this was at really low detection levels, so it was a residue. It wasn't of a concentration to be as a human health problem, but we did have a detection in the past of simazine, which is a brother sister to atrazine.
thank you, Councillor Walker.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you through the chair and thank you for your report. I guess mine is a real quick question. Based on the recent events in Motueka, do we have the capacity to leverage off that to do some education and some comms around individuals with their own bores around their bore head and what is best practice and what's available?
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, so either yearly or 6 monthly, we put something out in our newsline talking about how to look after your bore. The community infrastructure team is the one taking the samples at the moment, so that's Evan McKenzie and his water safety team. And they're having really robust conversations with all the property owners that they have there about how to protect their bore while that's happening. And the same with me. When I go and sample people's properties for groundwater quality, I have a really big conversation with them about looking after their bore, how it should be looking like. And if I notice that there's anything there that could be improved, how they can improve it. So it's a conversation that is always developing. When we come across new property owners and we find that they've got a bore on their property, we ensure that they are given that adequate information. But we also follow that up with regular-ish messages in our newsline and other communication channels to make sure that that information's more widespread if we haven't managed to find a property owner that we've talked to.
Thank you. Anything further? Looking for someone to move receipt of the report.
Very good.
Happy to move? You just didn't have your mic on for people to hear that you're very good and you're...
No, Mel, let it not myself. She did a great job.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Dakey, thank you. I'll put the resolution. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. Thank you very much. We're going to move into a confidential session.
I'll move.
I'll move by Deputy Mayor Bryant. And a seconder, please. Councillor Maru. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against, carried. We'll just wait until the thank you for your work on the desks, Bo. That leads me to close with karakia, karakia tātou, tāwhiri mai a hua o te taiao, mai a papatōnuku, e takoto nei, kia ranginui e tū iho nei, tūturu whakamaua kia tina, hui e, tae kia. Thank you, everybody.